would education change if we treated educator wellness as essential to student achievement? At Professional Inspiration, we believe educator and student wellness isn't optional, it's foundational. Our online courses, nationally accredited, are designed to inspire and empower and inform educators because when educators are well, students thrive. Explore our courses at professional-inspiration.com. Stay well.
Welcome back to Questions You Didn't Ask. I'm Naisha Frey, and this is it, our final chapter with Dr. Paul Fleming and Beyond the Band-Aid, Prevention, Power, and Public Health Equity. It's been a journey, and we're closing it out strong. Let's get back into it. You have said a mouthful, and it's so rich. One of the things that you said was related to how to reallocate that money, right? Related to police. And people immediately do this knee-jerk reaction. It's like, oh, you're going to get rid of their jobs. What if we took those same people, reskilled them into different types of jobs, increase their pay because they are underpaid, which creates stress, which creates aggression and violence, right? They are undernourished. They don't have enough sleep. They're not well, not because they're bad people, but because the system that we have them in doesn't allow them to thrive, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one point. My second observation from what you're sharing is that government is too slow and too fast. Government is too slow and too fast because to put a policy through, it takes a really long time and enact it. But that decision to poison Flint, Michigan through their water happened way too fast because they didn't do that root cause analysis. They didn't do that economic study. They didn't take the time to ask the right questions. To back it up even further in regard to the get your people mantra, a lot of those people that made those decisions, some of them are flaming racist, flaming, anti-environment people, but a lot of them are well-intentioned, right? They're well-intentioned people. They are people that if you met them at the grocery store, if you saw them at a school play, if you had the chance to be at the same cookout with them, you'll be like, they're cool people. But when given the opportunity to make a decision and break from the status quo, they might fold. And so when we think about get your people and how to enact change, it's not just about where you donate your money. It's not just about how you listen to community. Well, it is a lot about how you listen to community, but it's also what do you do with that information when the time presents itself? Because I've seen and heard way too many examples of well-intentioned people making the decision that leads to terror and violence. And when I say that, I don't mean it, a lot of us think about somebody showing up to your house with a gun or, unfortunately what happened on 9/11 and that thing when we say terrorism. Sometimes terrorism is a layoff.
Mm.
Sometimes terrorism is a denial letter when you're asking for financial support and help on your light bill. Sometimes terrorism is, the way that you treat that child who's cognitively different and has been othered in that classroom, and you're contributing to that. So we have to, how I was talking before about my conversation with Hulisa and how I had to challenge myself to better understand where she was coming from, where people like her were coming from. And I realized that I had some privileges and I had some blind spots. Don't be too slow and act too fast. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just, I think about, how people are so resistant to things like reparations for people of African descent, who are here in America, whose ancestors were a part of the transatlantic slave trade. or people in America who are African descent that have black skin or what's considered black, because it ain't really black, but you know what I'm saying, that had to deal with Jim Crow, that had to deal with the black codes and all that kind of stuff, redlining, everything else. They say, oh, that's too much money. There's no way that we could support those people. But what you don't understand is, what are you losing? What are you losing out on? You're losing out on entrepreneurship. You're losing out on brilliance. You're losing out on inventors and inventions. You're losing out on cures. You know, oh, we can't make those people rich. Nobody's asking to be rich.
No.
You know, but what you got is too good for me.
Yeah.
And that's not cool.
And even worse, I mean, the resistance in Congress is even to doing a study about reparations. They can't even get that passed, you know? And so, yeah, refusal to even consider the question, which is absurd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to jump into another absurdity before we come back to some good, happy places and forward thinking and imagination.
I'm ready for it.
So one of the reasons why I said go blue is because I had the good fortune of being able to do a summer research program at the University of Michigan. And it was probably one of my early experiences with formal research training and being exposed to what graduate school would be like for me in the future. And so that is the reason why University of Michigan has a soft spot in my heart, even though I'm wearing my UNC Tar Heel shirt right now. And both of these institutions, University of Michigan, UNC, have broken my heart in multiple ways, right? But the University of Michigan recently cut back its DEI work, right? And so because you're there as a professor and you're doing the type of research that you're doing that champions diversity, that champions equity, that champions inclusion and belonging, and all of those adjectives, intersectionality, and all those things. What has that rollback, pushback, cutback meant for you, your students, and the communities that you serve?
Yeah, it's been hard to experience. And yeah, I have been involved in DEI efforts, both formally with kind of formal roles related to DEI leadership, and then also informally and research, work in that area. So what I think is what may be toughest about it is the way that I see kind of what a lot of our community thinks that message sends to them. So I'm seeing hearing a lot of students of color, staff of color, other people of marginalized identities in our university community that are wondering or having to ask themselves, maybe they don't want me here. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I'm not supposed to be here. And that kind of breaks my heart because I think, part of the work I try to do, but many, many of my colleagues, is we are trying to create a space for all where we can all kind of come together. I mean, at least in my school of public health, around issues of public health, in my department around issues of health equity, right? And so the fact that people are having, and not to say that this is the first time anyone's ever questioned if they belong at a university, especially among people of color, that's something that's been ongoing. So I'm not saying that, but it's more widespread now. I think it's prompted a lot of kind of questions in that sense. I think the other thing I'll say is it's interesting also talking with some students because the generation of students I'm working with right now, they didn't really experience school before DEI really came on the scene. So there's some idea that, it's impossible to do equity work if a DEI office doesn't exist. I think, this is sort of a lesson for us all in this moment of we can keep doing the work. The work has to be done. We sometimes have to get more creative. We sometimes have to do it a little bit differently. We sometimes have to do it a little bit slower. We sometimes have to do it with fewer dollars or no dollars at all. But the push to create communities and systems based on that ethos of sharing, based on that ethos where we all see each other as human, based on that ethos where we all belong and are welcoming, that is going to persist. And I don't think that this administration or university administration can take that away from us. They are causing harm for sure. They are setting back this work for sure. But I don't want to let anybody frame it as, they're eliminating it or they've gotten rid, it's gone. It's not. We have to push the work forward in the ways that we can. So it's definitely had an impact at the university, but I personally am just trying to focus on, well, what can we do? What can we move forward? What resources do we have, and how do we use those to the maximum, potential?
Yeah, and that is, continues to be consistent in what you say about yourself, your research, and your book, especially, is that, and I think that you're right, and a lot of people have kind of taken that attitude. I know in the Black community, I heard a lot of people saying, "Hey, we've been here before. We've had to create a way out of no way, and we know how to do that. That is one of our specialties. We don't like it." We wish it wasn't that hard. It shouldn't be that hard. Folks are out here cutting their nose to spite their face by cutting back on DEI. And also recognizing that diversity, equity, inclusion, and those kind of buzzwords just was an evolution of what these different offices were from different eras, right? So, we talked about affirmative action in one case, but then that got a bad name and people started associating it with quotas, right? And so then you started talking about, okay, well, we need to have a minority cultural center of excellence or something of that sort, where people of color and non-white people or non-privileged people could come and be seen and receive support or get scholarships or what have you. Having these like non-traditional students and spaces for them to thrive and resources to help them, receive the education and that they needed, and have unique supports to help them in ways that made sense for their lives. So we've oftentimes had to rebrand with the times, right? And so what I hear you saying is that, we're going to have to look for different partners. We're going to have to repackage and rebrand again. And in some cases, yes, it's going to hurt and we'll have to do it for less money and sometimes no money. It's not right. It's not our preference. But staying home and doing nothing, that ain't working either. So
Right. It's kind of like what we were saying earlier of some of these universities are essentially smashing this infrastructure. That's not what we would choose for sure. But what can we create in its wake, right? What can we create? What can we build? And so there is some opportunity there. And, as somebody who was a part of DEI, different DEI work, I'm the first to say, like, it wasn't perfect. We all had our critiques of it, right? And so now this is an opportunity to evolve it in different ways. But am I pissed that they're cutting resources and sending this messaging or kind of pulling back from what we, thought were values that these institutions held? Although I'm a little skeptical that any institutions hold values, to be honest. A lot of just following what's going to be best for their bottom line. That's what institutions are designed to do oftentimes, right? It's the people within them that act, in human ways or not. The institution isn't going to be the human. An institution is not human. We as the people within them have to create the humanness within them.
If you're enjoying the show as much as we love creating it, consider showing your support by buying us a cup of coffee. Visit buymeacoffee.com/NaishaFrey-O. That's buymeacoffee.com/NaishaFrey-O. All one word. Each cup is just $5, and every single one helps us continue to produce, develop, and sustain the high quality content you've come to expect from Questions You Didn't Ask. Thank you for your continued support, and let's keep the conversation going. We do. And just to be real honest and speak from my own experience as well, is that, we do have to recognize that these institutions, like you said, are made up of people that create and enforce rules, that make decisions about which rules are going to be enforced, which rules are not. And so I think that gets back to the get your people kind of hashtag, in that depending where there's this like schism in institutions, right? Where if you have the privilege to be there, in order to be in a position of power, there's a certain amount of cooperation you have to exhibit. When you get in that position of power and you have cooperated, what have you become complicit in? And if you haven't fully cooperated, but you have picked your battles well, right? And still been able to move up, because I will not say that everyone at the top is complicit. I will say that those who are true allies at the top have learned how to pick their battles, and they know how to play the politics really well. But unfortunately, like you said, there's oftentimes too few of them, because if there's too many, then the whole institution has to change. And so what you find is that there becomes a weeding out system. So that you have just enough freedom fighters and truth sayers at the table to balance and maybe create the optics of integrity, or the optics of liberalism and freedom. But those that pull the strings and levers and actually hold the power, they will roll whichever direction they need to roll to get that bottom line and get those perks and get those bonuses and get, and so then we run back into this capitalist mindset of hoarding. And I think what happens, especially in higher education at institutions like the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and the University of Michigan and Harvard and my other institution of higher learning, Columbia University, is that, we have these perceptions of them as being these bastions of knowledge, of being purveyors of truth, of being halls and doorways of opportunity. And then you get in them and you realize this is a corporation. And now you are no longer in no sense. And now you are dealing with your senses. And now you're having to figure out, to your point about what some of your colleagues of color's experience is, what is my place? Do I have a place here? Is this truly who I am? Does this satisfy where I'm going and what I aspire to be? And some people are able to carve out that niche in that space and be unbothered or be less bothered, right? And still get the work done. And I think that Swiss cheese of, having these safe spaces, because that's one of the reasons why I can still hold my head high and say that I'm a UNC grad, is because I had so many people who, despite the challenges that I was up against, they made safe spaces for me. And I will say loud and clear that Paul Fleming was one of those safe spaces, and that our entire cohort was one of those safe spaces. And I'm thankful for that, because otherwise it would have been a totally different experience and a lot more traumatic. And so what I'll say too is that we have to think about, as we think about imagine doing better, what would it look like if we actually rewarded leaders that focus on prevention thinking instead of punishment.
One of the things I think when I think about leaders, like you said, they have to pick their battles. They have to play politics, all of that. And when you think about leaders who have led transformative change,
Mm-hmm.
what they're not doing is just sort of spontaneously saying, we're going to do this, or making a change on their own. What they're doing is they're getting their people, all different kinds of people in this case.
Yes.
But they are, through their relationships, they are bringing people on board. They are sowing the seeds for change before they make that announcement, before they push people in that direction. They've already laid some foundation and groundwork for it, right? So part of the essential skill set here is that ability to build relationships and sway people in a way and bring them over to your way of thinking. And the reality is that sometimes that takes time. And so, like, on the one hand, I think your question about like leaders taking a prevention mindset, I would love to see more of it. But also, what leaders need to be doing is they need to be teaching their constituents or the people that they're leading about what a prevention mindset. Why is this so useful for us? Where could this get us as a country? Where could this get us as a society? Get people excited about that vision. And then you take people there. Then you say, all right, now everyone's on board. Let's go there. And that's kind of some of the principles of public health, right? Like when we build partnerships, the first step is building trust across it. We get to know each other. What are people's motivations? What do people need? What do they want? And then we come up with a collective idea of where we want to go together. And it's much easier to lead people there, right? And so I think for leaders at our institutions, but also leaders throughout our country, this prevention mindset can be, language and a tool that is used to bring people along to this vision, right? Prompting people to imagine. When was the last time our politicians asked us to imagine, right? A lot of times politicians are just out there spouting what they want. When you see some of these really successful politicians, they are listening, and they are kind of building a tapestry, building a quilt based on what they're hearing from all their people, because they're building something beautiful from the collective, not just from their own ideas.
I agree. I think that's a big part of what made Barack Obama's, especially his first campaign, so successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was encouraging us to dream.
Yeah.
And he was also very effective at building and reflecting his coalition, his diverse coalition.
Yep.
So not just having the coalition and being like, ain't they great? Look, but doing your own thing.
Yep.
But actually reflecting that. And, some people still have the right to, analyze and maybe even criticize his actual presidency, both terms, what have you. And like you said, we're human. Nobody's perfect. When he did wrong, he did wrong. But I tell you, of the things that I can observe or what that I know of, there was a lot more good than there was bad, just in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, yeah, and hope and change. Like the foundation was around building a better society, right?
Yeah.
And actually doing the work to get there. And I think what we're seeing out of a lot of politicians right now, particularly the administration, is a lot of negativity. There is some language around, like making a better future, but it's all blaming and it's all tearing down. What we need to get to is, what do we want to build? What do we want to create? What do we want people to have? And we're just so far from that conversation right now, kind of at a national political level. But I think we do see some bright spots in local level and other things, bright spots of people who are leading and really getting us closer to a vision of change.
So as we're developing this vision as individuals and as a collective, and we're kind of coming to a close of our time together, what's one question you want our listeners to ask themselves after listening to this conversation? And take your time.
I love that question. And I'm going to ask you to answer that question too. I think the thing I would ask listeners is, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel when you imagine the world that you wish we lived in? Because it's that starting place. It's using all your senses to actually try to put yourself in that world. Because once we have the vision for it, just like Robin D.G. Kelly said, the map to the new world is in that imagination. So if we can actually articulate it and see it and feel it, we'll have a better idea of how to get there.
So one thing that just came to me, I love the way that you turned this question back around for me. I love that. Thank you. Because something that I've been meditating on quite a bit and that I'm looking at right now physically in my space is a reminder. And some of my listeners out there who I've shared this with will be like, oh my gosh, because I've been saying this a lot. And that is, the place in which I'll fit into will not exist until I make it, which is by James Baldwin.
That's powerful.
And so it's very powerful. And so I want you to ask yourself, what is that place? Where is that place? And how do we get there together? So that is my question for my audience. The place in which I'll fit into will not exist until I make it. So what is that place? Where is that place? And how do we get there together? Before we leave, we've got some other important questions. How can people support your work and pre-order your book, Imagine Doing Better?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. Well, you can pre-order on places like Bookshop or Amazon. So it should be available at any kind of online retailer, and it's called Imagine Doing Better. So yeah, that's one way you can pre-order. And then, more broadly, if you are interested in the ideas that I've shared here on this podcast, or if you do read the book and enjoy it, tell a friend. That's maybe one of the things you do with your people, is you give them the book and say, let's imagine doing better together. And, I'd be happy to join whatever group your listeners have and talk about some of these ideas with your group as well.
That's awesome. And I will encourage people to visit Paul Fleming's website and join his newsletter. He drops gems all the time. I think your newsletter actually helped us reconnect in some ways on a deeper level, because I just enjoyed those nuggets that you were sharing routinely, and was so happy to receive the newsletter because it provided a lot of resources, thought practices, and just insights that that just really touched me and helped move me and motivate me in a special way. So I'm going to be sharing Paul's website so that you can check out his newsletter, learn more about him, and hopefully you'll be pre-ordering that book and getting your copy, Imagine Doing Better, in your mailbox or at your local bookshop very soon. Paul, it is a pleasure as usual. I am so happy that we had a chance to be on this show together today. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful conversation.
More next time on Questions You Didn't Ask.